All right, the property prequel, be in the know before you buy. I'm, as always, really excited. We've got a guest episode today. I thought I'd change it up a little bit, actually, and then I won't reveal too much just yet. I'll let the organic chat happen, as always, but always appreciate the feedback. We had an amazing ep last week with Kim Gallagher. It was one of my favorites, just on sort of home and energy and different things you can do if you are someone looking to, I guess, profit from not only your next development, but if you're a buyer out there as well, just the thoughts on like energy, floor plan, things like that. And then I'm still getting tons of feedback from my 9 biggest property buying tips from the last financial year. And I'm actually going to take some of those lessons and apply it into this chat with an amazing guest, Natasha Etschmann. She's the host of the Get Rich Slow Club. It's one of Australia's best investing podcasts. And also she's an co-author of How to Not Work Forever. Start investing and build a life you love. And she's a tender age of
26.
26. Yeah. Wow. I can't wait to dive into this one. Natasha Etschmann, thanks for popping by.
Thanks so much for having me. Got lots to live up to if your last one was your favorite episode ever.
No. Big shoes to fill. But look, we're talking off air. I'm sure you're well and truly going to fill those ones. I guess first, Natasha, the book title, where did that come from? I love it.
We had a different name that was a bit more boring beforehand and we had to find a new name. They were just like, you can't use that one anymore. And we ran an event last year sometime called, it was like How to Not Work. We wanted to call it How to Not Work Until You Die, but that's a bit morbid and we can't use that. Yeah. So kind of developed into a more friendlier version of that. Yeah. I wanted it to be really accessible. And often you read investing and you're like, ugh, like you know about it. You're like, oh, that's finance bros or people who are really old and have lots of money. So this is kind of a more accessible way into it.
And why a book? What made you want to get into being an author?
Honestly, they approached me. So that kind of like put it in my mind. But I've done the podcast, I've done social media. I just want to make something for people who like reading. I love reading books as well. So it just felt like the next step.
So you can sort of access your wisdom and knowledge and...
Yeah, well, when I first started learning how to invest, there wasn't much Australian specific knowledge. It was lots of people in the US. And then people not being very specific. Like they were like, buy an index fund. And you're like, great, how, which one? So I wanted to make a really practical, specific guide.
Yeah, I love it. And just quickly, we'll dive into I've got some cool angles I want to go down this one because obviously a lot of the listeners of this one are property buyers. And I really like your journey because you've started on the property ladder so young, but you're using other methods to build deposits and diversify and things like that, which I'm very big on. And I think like any investing, diversification, not putting all your eggs in one basket, but being at such a young age, I'm keen to dive into how you're able to do it and some little key tips and tricks that are going to help everyone. But just quickly, what's the journey to being an author, a podcast host, a financial, a finfluencer? Yeah. What's the journey to that? How did that all come about?
It was a bit random initially. I was just like bored during COVID and I saw people in the US doing it and I was like, oh, I might start doing it as well. Yep. But I was really lucky because my parents spoke about money and they were really awesome about it. And then I got to the age of like 18, 19, I realized my friends didn't have the same knowledge that I had. Yeah. So I was the friend that everyone would come to ask for money advice or things like that. Yeah. So I just decided to start sharing that on Instagram and it really took off from there. Like people loved the more relatable angle. Yes. Back then I was still a student. I was still working as a support worker. I was earning like maybe $70,000 a year when I first started. So people were like, oh, this is more relatable, I guess.
Yeah, I love it. And I was actually just going to ask that. What was the money story growing up for you with family dynamic? Was it spoken around at the kitchen table much or was it very...
It's been interesting because like my mum is very risk averse and my dad is a lot more of a risk taker.
Really?
But they've always been quite open about that and always discussed it. One set of my grandparents are quite bad with money and the other set are really good with money. So my whole childhood you could see the two very differences. Yeah. We moved around a lot for Dad's work. He works in mining. So I got to live in lots of little small mining communities where people were quite driven and like had lots of goals and were planning for the future. So it was, a very different upbringing to what some other people might have where you don't actually hear people speak about it ever.
Yeah. I love that. I might just unpack that a bit because I had a session with one of my mentors the other week and it was purely on wealth management and things like that and during building my wealth and things. And we actually started the session with the money story at home. And he asked me a question, which I'd love to find your answer. Like he asked me basically what's one positive and one negative from your upbringing. Like for me, I had immigrant parents. So a positive was I was like a very good saver. because it was all lack of, right? And I had all the hand-me-downs growing up and things like that. But as I got older, I realized, I just struggled to actually spend it, which was actually a positive. But then on the flip side, it's like sometimes you have to take adverse risk to be able to accumulate wealth too. So that was kind of my roadblock that I've worked through and getting better at. What would it be for you think? One positive, one negative from your money story, you think, growing up?
Almost a little bit similar. Like my dad's parents were immigrants as well. And
really? Where from?
They were Austrians initially, then they moved to South Africa and then kind of had to start again in Australia. So he grew up in a very frugal family as well. And my granddad, even now, he still works and like they're doing fine, but he'll still eat all of your scraps off the plate and be like,
turn all the lights off, the switches.
Doing over like a $20
Yes. Yeah. Same.
Yeah. So, and then my dad has always worked in just like typical jobs, and I never saw anyone around me doing business things or taking that next step. So I guess it was the same where I was really frugal for so long. I didn't want to spend money. But now that I work for myself, you kind of have to spend money to make money if you want to grow. So that's been an interesting mindset change for sure.
So you'd say the positive would be that you sort of noticed, overspent. You're a bit of you'd be more on the saver side.
The positive's definitely like just everything I have learned, just like hearing the conversations, hearing what people talk about in terms of money, hearing the little like money stories they tell themselves, like, oh, that's not for me, like that's too expensive, oh, we probably can't do that, that's too hard, like that stuff. And then seeing the two completely different sides to how people spend money has been interesting as well. And then also just like being in that mindset of you work a job, you invest, that's it. But now that I have kind of stepped into business stuff, I've met more business owners, I'm like, oh wow, there's kind of the world out there.
There's another door. It was one of the lessons I actually did on the podcast. I was mentioning the 9 biggest tips from last FY year, and one of them was getting in better doors, better rooms. And one of my early mentors told me it's just like you're at a party and then there's this door at the back and you open that and you look in there and everyone's talking a different thing. They're listening to different music. They're just playing a different game, right? And it's continually immersing yourself in different rooms and different doors.
Social media has been such a great hack for that, like just building a personal brand where people know you for something. And now I get a lot more opportunities because people just think of you when they think of something, which has been really good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's a really good question too for anyone listening on what are the positive and negatives you've, I guess, got identified to yourself from your money
What is your first money memory?
Mine would be, I'd say, just saving. I remember I saved around 20, I think when I got to 20K when I was quite young, but I just worked very hard. I worked in like factories and things like that. I was trying to become a footy player. So for me, I lived at home, ate mum's food, did all that. And I remember that was my first memory of like, actually it was because me and my mates were talking around money and how much they had saved. And then that was the first time I was just aware of like, oh, if you just save money, you have money. But I did nothing with it. Nothing.
You just like saved it.
Just did absolutely nothing.
What was your first money memory when you were like a kid? Can you think of something your parents had said?
I'd say it wouldn't be the money growing on trees thing. It'd be something along that, like, Matt, you can't have that, or, like scarcity.
Yeah, the scarcity stuff.
Yeah, the scarcity side of things. So I feel that's something definitely when I got to early 20s and started making some money playing professional sport. And then when I wanted to get into property early on, I had to break that to the point of I didn't tell my parents I bought a house till 12 months in.
Oh, wow.
Of owning it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because I was afraid that because they were really anti against debt.
Really? Even for buying property?
Yep.
Interesting. How
Yep.
did you
They
know?
bought cash back in the day, like the old school.
Yeah, you can buy one for
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. I don't know. I just summed it up. I got brave and I told them, and they were a bit like scared at the start, and then it's just crazy as well. And I guess add value for anyone listening, like your parents want the best for you, but it's not always the best advice.
Yeah.
They love you, but sometimes I had to go completely 180 on my parents' advice.
Yeah.
They did not want me to buy a house.
No, my parents didn't want me to start my Instagram at all. They were like, you can't talk online about your money. Yeah.
Interesting.
Very against it for a while.
Why? Why do you think that was?
Like, you don't tell people how much you earn outside of like the circle. Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, about scammers and people are going to
It's like taboo.
Yeah. And like, what are people going to think about you and all of that stuff? And now they're pretty happy with it all. But yeah, it was interesting initially being like, oh no, like it's different. People are reacting differently. And the whole point is to do something a bit different.
What would be one piece of advice for someone who hears both of our stories just then on kind of fear of maybe a family member? What would be your advice there?
I like yours of just doing it and then telling them later so they can't make a decision. Like, don't let people, only go to the people who you know are going to support you in something you want to do. Like,
That's very true.
Yeah, because I made the mistake of taking people to home opens with me really early on and they had a lot of opinions, which is fine because I bought well in the end.
Yeah.
But I can imagine that could go south pretty quickly of them being like, oh, well, what about this area? What about this place instead? Or like, oh, that one's a bit ugly.
Yeah.
So definitely, don't tell them straight away and go to people who you know will support you.
Wow. I'm glad you brought that up, actually. It's just relating now, having the business and helping so many people with the team. You find that the people who bring the parents along for the journey, some of them are very supportive and some are very nearly to the point of we have to have a chat to the client and just mention, hey, like, just making sure what's your goals and what's your parents' goal, because they're not aligned right
letting
now.
them speak for you.
Yeah, exactly right.
Someone who bought property and they were 22, I think they were saying, and they said they didn't tell anyone or show anyone until it had completely gone through, like none of their friends, because it was quite ugly on the outside.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to be persuaded against it.
Interesting. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So with that then, where were you getting your information? You talk around surrounding yourself. You sound like someone we're talking off air who values personal growth and learning. Where were you finding your information? And
back then was just Google.
Just Google, yeah.
I asked my parents, but they aren't big on buying shares as much. Like Dad lost a bit of money buying mining shares. So the story around shares in my house was like, oh, they're bad and they're really dangerous and they're really risky. So I talked to them about property, but less so about shares. So it's more just like Googling and seeing what came up.
Yeah. So I guess the key takeaway then is, just surrounding yourself with what you want to learn.
When I was 18, people weren't talking about shares, so there wasn't really anyone I could go to. Now I have friends who invest as well, so it's easier.
So you can have your little catch-ups and chat.
Yeah, it's just like in the conversation, you'll be like, oh my God, do you see what happened here?
Yeah.
Chat about it generally.
I love that. Yeah. Just on the share thing. So did shares come before the property?
Yeah, I invested $1,000 when I was 18. And
awesome.
I just watched it for a while.
We just reinvesting straight back in any returns that would come?
No, just watching it. Because there has to be a catch to this. Like I didn't quite get it. Too easy. Like there must be something I've done wrong. There must be something bad with it. I was just watching it for a little while. And then I was kind of investing little bits here and there, and I started using micro investing apps, which is a bit more consistent. But I didn't invest a lot until after I bought my first property.
So when you got your first property, then you started going heavier into shares?
Yeah, because then I'd use my deposit and it was gone. I was like, okay.
Was your deposit based off, did you accumulate most of your deposit just work and saving?
Yeah, just saving. Yeah.
What would be your tips there, right? So what was the purchase price of your first home?
$295,000.
$295,000. Yeah. So did you do a 5%, 10%, 20%?
20, yeah.
20?
So $52,000 was my deposit because I also had the first home buyer's grant as well, the $10,000, yeah.
What would be your biggest tip then for, let's break down the process. Let's go to the first home buyer right now. And there'll be lots of people listening who are in this and they just feel like they can't they're on the hamster wheel, right? Yeah. And property, they're just seeing it move further and further away. What would be your advice to those people trying to accumulate, I guess, cash for that first property?
Yeah, you can definitely look at investing if your horizon is like 5 years or longer or something like that. But I think a lot of people are getting really disheartened just looking at properties where they live now. Like they'll look at an apartment in Sydney and be like, that's $1 million. I can't afford that. This is too hard. But definitely looking at other places, like can you buy in Perth or somewhere else like that?
Like a rent vest kind of strategy, yeah.
Can you look a bit further out of where you actually want to live? Look at those schemes, like definitely the 5% deposit is a great option. Can you access other things? Like can your parents be guarantor if you have that opportunity? Like just kind of try and think of how you can do it and see what's out there. Because there's so many different solutions for everyone, but you have to decide you want to do that. If you keep telling yourself you can't do it, then you won't.
100%. I mean, mindset's probably number one, isn't it? Getting that in the right place. What about in terms of, all right, practical tips now for, you seem like a good saver, and I think that's foundationally one of the most important things, right, to get that first deposit. Any key things from your late teens to 20s that allowed better saving? Was there any habits, tips, tricks?
I saved like everything. I was really frugal.
Really?
I didn't buy drinks at restaurants. I buy the cheapest thing on the menu. I charge like every dollar. I'd say no to lots of things, but I knew why I was doing it because back then I traveled quite often. So I was like, I'm not going to that night out or whatever because I'm going on holiday. And I used this metric of like one day in India or Thailand was like $30. So if I was going to spend $30 on dinner.
Takes out a day.
Yeah, so that really helps.
That's awesome.
And then I just kind of gamified it as well. Like I really enjoyed finding good deals and I found that so exciting. So that made it a lot more fun as well.
In terms of just general shopping and
finding
stuff like that.
coupons,
Yeah.
things like that. Getting buy one, get one free, getting things really cheap. Like that was so much fun.
Yeah.
And I made it my whole personality for a while. So that really helped too, because people didn't push me to do anything. They like knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
Which I didn't. I think some people find it really hard to say no to stuff.
Yeah.
And that's your personality. People are like, oh, that's okay.
I'm just giggling because like there's definitely some similarities. I remember my mates used to pay me out because I'd be the pack lunch guy. So any like footy trips or anything, I just refused to eat out. I'd have the packed sandwich and packed lunch, and part of it was health, but most of it was I just didn't want to again spend.
And being smart too, like takes control as well. Like you pick the restaurant.
Yeah.
Just waiting for someone else to invite you to something that you can't afford.
Yeah.
People enjoy that because people generally don't want all that stuff. Yeah.
A little hack as well on that, just because it's reminded me of it. I do my assistant. She's in the building and she laughed when she booked it in or made it an optional. But like people want to catch up instead of a meal. It's like let's go hang out and bring your own. Yeah, it's like a BYO, like sit at Burley. Yeah, BYO food.
Just invite people over again.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. So it nearly sounds like I actually never heard that, the calculating what it would cost or what that opportunity cost of spending is taking away from somewhere else.
And like find whatever it is for you. Whether it's like a house is quite hard if you want to save $100,000, that feels really far away.
Yes.
If you feel like that is a day of rent or something like that, something where you can really quantify what you're doing.
Yep. And it sounds like you always had a strong why, which was going to lead to my next question. What do you feel? Obviously, I'm not going to ask so deep. What's your why? But I guess for where you are in life right now, what was, I guess, firstly, let's go back before buying. What was the why there to buy it? And then moving forward now, where do you feel is kind of where that why is kind of growing or adapting?
Interesting for now. Back then, I just wanted to make money. Like I enjoyed making money. I just, wanted to see
just purely make money. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I love traveling, and it was like, if you want to go away, you need to make more money. Yeah. And I studied OT and I worked in healthcare back then. Okay. Occupational therapy. Yeah. And there's a very like big ceiling, I guess, where you can't really go past how much you earn unless you have your own practice. But even then, like it's so determined by funding and the rates that you can get through the NDIS and stuff like that. Yeah. So I knew that if I wanted to make money, I had to do it another way. We had a boat when I was a kid and I loved that. And I wanted to be able to buy a boat and like a four-wheel drive really comfortably. Yeah. I was stressed about it. So that was always kind of in the back of my head as well. Yeah. Okay. To just have a spare $50,000 to drop on something. Yeah. That would always be fun.
What about Natasha in terms of like balancing, because you've been to 35 countries?
35, yeah.
Yeah, 35 countries. I've seen that somewhere. That's amazing. But you've still been able to achieve the house and things like that in your 20s. Mm-hmm. People think it's one or the other.
Yeah.
How did you balance the two? Like, what was it for you? Did you have like a framework or a method to it, or?
It wasn't an exact method back then, but it was just like the frugal mindset. Like I'd always pick the cheapest places to travel to. So I would pick like somewhere where I wanted to go exactly. I'd be like, where are the cheapest flights at the moment? Yeah. So one of my trips, I got a $200 flight from Perth to Hong Kong, and then I ended up traveling up through China for like 6 weeks. That was all because of a $200 flight. Yeah. So it was all based on what was the best deal at the time. And I did lots of Asia and like India and stuff like that, which is a lot cheaper.
So your holidays would be based on where the deal was?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Some not go there anyway, but you can make the best out of anything.
One thing I'm picking up, Natasha, you love a deal.
Yeah. Still now, I enjoy the deal more than like the actual
thing. Yeah. And you struck me as someone who would savor, I guess, experiences over material things. Yeah. Would that be fair to say? Yeah. You reckon?
I would love a nicer house now that I'm getting a bit older and I'm like, wow, I've looked at some nicer houses around. But back then, definitely it was like, I want to live the cheapest I can so I can do the most stuff.
Lifestyle creep. Have you heard the term lifestyle creep?
Oh my gosh, yes. I have been getting my makeup done at Mecca because you can redeem it on products afterwards when I have an event or something. Yeah. And one time I got this moisturizer that was $100. So I was like, oh, it's included. Yeah, whatever. But now I love that moisturizer and I can't go back to the cheap ones. And that is like the perfect example I have of it's hard to go back once you've experienced a good life.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? I was chatting to someone the other week, like lifestyle creep. And I said on that podcast too, is like sometimes you have to clean up the past to be able to move forward. And some people, like it definitely doesn't sound like but there's a lot of people who the more money they make, their spending just goes basically in line. So someone on 50K is kind of in the same position as someone on 300K. Mm-hmm. It's just different lifestyle.
Hard to go backwards once you do that.
Yeah, I agree. How have you been mindful of, I guess, that? Is that more just having, again, your goals and your whys and just checking? Like, do you budget and check all your expense as much?
Not anymore, because I think I know now, like, because I've been doing it for so long, I'm quite intentional and I will know when I've overspent, or I always invest first, and like my mortgage is all automated and everything like that. So I know no matter what I spend, like I've already invested the minimum amount already.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's more just being, just mindful of it. Like, sometimes I'll go and calculate things for videos. Like I went to Bali a few months ago and I spent more than I thought. So I was like, oh, better have to like pay more attention now. But just like those little cues for helping me keep track of stuff.
I get you.
Yeah.
I was just going to pick out, because I believe all successful people in property, finance, they've got good processes, right?
Yeah.
I'm big on like having a system and process for whatever it is. Can you think of maybe one process you've implemented or something in your, because I heard you say there, like something gets automated to hear some money in, like
automated.
Can you run me through the like, is it like a funnel where, all right, income in this account, then it gets automated to here?
Yeah.
Do you have like a basic kind of one that might add some value to anyone trying to really nail financial goals?
Yeah, I've got my own company set up now, so I pay myself regularly. That's automated, so it goes into my main like money hub or whatever it's called. And then from there, my mortgage gets direct debited every week. My investments get direct debited every week as well. And any bills are set up too. And then whatever's kind of left over to that automatically pays off my credit card, because I like to earn points on the credit card as well.
Yeah.
But all of that happens no matter what. And then whatever I've got left over is like, I can pretty much spend it if I'd like to. Yeah. But and then sometimes I automate savings, but not really at the moment. I'm just putting it all into shares.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of that is really the old rich dad, poor dad theory of pay yourself first. Yeah. I love it. That's really good. And I think it sounds, you explain it so simply, right? Because you're used to it. But what you just said there is like 80% of getting by, I reckon. Then that's not a hard framework, but it's a really good one. Literally, your income is getting, instead of it going into the spend funnel, you're just dispersing it into
where it needs to go.
Yeah, where it needs to go first.
It is hard to work out initially if you don't know what you spend. Like it takes some time to figure out what those numbers are. I found this quite hard when I transitioned from being like a sole trader to having a company. And I used to just be like, I can spend my money because it's all mine. But then having to actually automate that and be like, what am I going to earn every week now? Like that felt a bit hard initially. And now it's fine and it still fluctuates a little bit. But yeah, that kind of threw me for a little while. It's just like, okay, I'm not paying myself because I can't be bothered dealing with it for a while. Yeah.
I'm interested to know, Natasha, what part of your life do you feel you lack discipline in? You seem pretty disciplined with all your, but is there an area of life?
Phone. Yeah.
Phone? Yeah.
My phone. Yeah.
In terms of like screen time or?
Yeah. Because like Instagram and TikTok and my podcast and everything is a huge part of my job now.
True.
And it's hard to separate like personal time and work time. And I find when I'm scrolling, I'm like, oh, it's just research. So that's hard.
Yeah.
And there's always like a need to check how things are going and if something's gone like negatively viral or something. So I definitely spend a lot more time on my phone than I would like. But the more time I spend on my phone, the more money.
Like an ROI kind of thing. Yeah.
And you kind of need to stay up to date with the trends to a certain extent as well. So that's hard to juggle that.
Yeah. How much time do you dedicate a week to like producing content and things to build your brand and just whenever you
at the moment? Yeah. I feel like, it's definitely a lot all the time now because it's so easy to pick up your phone and just like reply to a comment or reply to an email or something like that. So it's definitely like taken over my life temporarily, but it's also the season of life now. Like you write a book, you want to promote it.
Yes.
Instagram's doing well. I've grown quite quickly in the last year or so. So kind of just rolling with it now, but it's definitely not that balanced at the moment.
Yeah. And then on the property front, Natasha, so I heard you say somewhere like, I love that because this is related to my podcast on the 9 biggest tips, and it was around getting in the helicopter view, which I'll explain in a second. But I remember hearing it somewhere you had some trouble with tenants and stuff with your property. And this is super common with first-time investors is, a bit of a scar, right?
Yeah.
Firstly, what was the scar with your first property and how did you tell yourself to maybe not sell it and just keep moving through, you think?
I was never going to sell it. I was always just debating buying a second property because shares are a lot easier. And I've lived like a bit of a random all over life where I like to just quit things and move and try something new. So I didn't want to have huge debts hanging over me. So for ages, I was like, shares are so much better.
Yeah.
But then seeing the capital growth you can get from property and things like positively geared, that's hard to ignore as well. But the tenants, they were just like, I don't know, they're just a little bit annoying. Like they kept asking for things that I couldn't do. Like they wanted me to build a big screen on the balcony because the outdoor furniture was getting wet. And this property's fully furnished, so it's all my furniture. The stuff like I can't tell Strata I'm building in the wall. Or they said the toilet wasn't flushing as strongly as their one at work. I was like, okay, great. Like I can't do anything with that information. Just like lots of requests like that over and over and over again, which is like fine. But if you're getting emails all the time about stuff you can't fix, it's just a bit annoying compared to my shares where they just do what they do.
Automated,
Yeah. So it was not, I never wanted to sell it because it was doing well in that way. I was just like,
Annoying you.
do I imagine having like 3, 4, 5 of these? Like that would be so annoying.
Yeah.
But now I've got a tenant now who like rarely ever talks to me. So that's easy.
Yeah. No, I was telling, and I'm glad.
No, my strata fees. That was the big problem.
Yeah.
My property manager didn't pay my strata fees for like over a year.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then the legal letters were getting sent to my apartment, not to me.
Geez.
Yeah. And then they finally, so my next door neighbor, I think, told me, my old next door neighbor, that I hadn't paid my fines or whatever. And I was like, what?
Wow.
What's going on? Yeah. And then I opened it, like I finally got in contact with them and they sent me like $2,000 in late fees. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That was not great. That was property management.
Yeah. I was going to say that's PM. PM. Yeah. So I guess big one there, like I loved how you said capital growth because I get this a lot. And as I've built my portfolio, like the headaches become more. Like it is something like I'll just prepare. But again, I think having a team, like you said that there, like if you can kind of funnel that team in between of dealing with things under a certain amount and stuff like that. But I said in the other podcasts I did that one property in particular, just they thrashed it. And luckily I had Terry Shear, shout out Terry Shear and the landlord insurance. Yeah. Man, best. If you don't have landlord insurance on your investment properties, you're crazy. Just FYI.
It's so cheap. Cheaper than I thought it would be.
Crazy. Yeah. And I'm talking, they did a number. I think it was a divorce. And long story short, I had to kick them out, obviously, but they ruined the place.
Yeah.
And then literally the next person that came in had a bit of a mishap there. And long story short, though, that property has been my best performer to the date. And I just had to, and interest rates went up. Like I bought it in May 22, something like that. And literally it just went bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
So it felt like it was sucking me, this one property. I was like, you know what? That headache feeling, it only takes one tenant to like, oh, this tap's annoying me. It's just like, oh, another, I'm gone. Yeah. But again, my mentor is get in the helicopter and like look at like the capital growth that thing made over like a 24-month period is like 3 times my salary. Yeah, and I was just like, actually, it doesn't matter. Like it's part of doing business with trying to get capital growth, right? Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned like capital growth because I love shares and property. I'm big on both and I want to do more in the share department, but I always find like that compounding capital growth and the ability to, I guess, OPM other people's money and leverage against it over time is a very powerful thing. But I like what you're doing. Is it a case of, is the share portfolio kind of, you've kind of got this in one bucket over here and the property, like are you keeping them kind of separate or are you keeping them fully separate?
Yeah. Like I've got a bit more in shares now that I put into my property. But I'm hoping to buy another property later this year, which is exciting, but that'll all be with equity from my first one, which is cool.
I was going to say, so you're going to use equity and that's awesome. Why would you use equity?
Because I don't want to use my own money.
Yeah.
Just why not? Like it's, of course there's like a risk of taking out more loans and stuff like that, but I've done it pretty conservatively so far. And I've got like maybe $250,000 in shares. It's always there as a buffer as well. I've got like maybe $50,000 in cash as well as like more of an emergency thing. So it doesn't matter if I still have another loan. I think I can still pay off all the mortgages comfortably.
And then utilize the cash for other things. Or,
And like with business stuff, like things can go bad pretty quickly. So you want to have a safety net too.
I love it. No, the reason I ask, a lot of young people, a lot of my older mentors, obviously I learned a lot from them, but OPM is like one of the strongest things, other people's money. A lot of people don't actually understand the whole equity thing, especially
people. It's like, it's too good to be true. Like, what do you mean I can buy a house with no money?
It's insane. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like really that first one, you've done so well, Natasha, to be able to grind your way there with obviously savings and things like that. But if you buy your first one right and then you're a good saver and you good disciplines and you got all your little funnel set up, you may never have to use your cash again to buy a property.
Yes, and that's why I like property more now because I've been watching that play out and I'm like, this is
insane. So
much more powerful than the shares that I put so much more into.
Yeah. And then if you're a business owner, this is the cool thing, right? Utilizing that cash to reinvest into the thing that's the bigger your net profits, the bigger your borrowing, and then it's just one, and they can all a good accountant will be able to tie things in. And
how do you, I feel like I have to have you on my podcast because I've got lots of questions as well. A quick one. How do you feel about the ethics around owning multiple properties?
In terms of just the ethics of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like it. I'm up to my 16th rental now, and I sort of think I'm added 16 shelters around Australia to provide for people. Like I'm actually going and visiting one of, I don't visit a lot of them, but the last few, I visited the neighborhoods and things like that. And it's just like, I can see this changing. Last time, there was one property in particular. I remember when I bought it 6 years ago, it was in a suburb called Deception Bay.
Deception.
Yeah.
Is it in Queensland?
In Queensland, northern Brisbane, but it's low socio-economic. And I actually always because back when I was younger as well, I didn't have huge deposits. So I was just like, instead of looking at blue chip, like proper blue chip, I just wanted to get in areas where the bridesmaid suburb theory, get within sort of a radius of good suburbs. And this one remind me of Palm Beach, where I invested in early on the Gold Coast. It used to be like a Centrelink suburb, I call them.
Centrelink suburb, yeah.
Yeah, where there's a Centrelink in there, housing commission and things like that. But around it was some really blue chip suburbs, and it was surrounded by water, and it was really nice. It was actually really nice. It was just, it had a really bad feel in it. Yeah. Like just a bad feel. But like I grew up in a suburb called Inala, and I seen that change over time. It was a crime back in the day. Now it's worth a ton. So I was never really worried about that. But then when I went back there a few years later, I could see some new developments coming in. And it was just like, that's why I got into it, because it takes time. I'm not looking to get rich on year one.
Yeah.
So I get rich in year 5 and onwards. And then I always think, I remember meeting the tenant. I never met her in my life. She's just a single, it pays her, she gets a bit of money from Centrelink, things like that. And I just bumped into her, and it was so nice. Like, she was very thankful.
Oh, that's
and it made me put away my investor hat and my net wealth hat for a second and just be like, I'm providing her shelter.
Yeah.
So I think of it that way. And I just built a granny flat in one in Brisbane. And again, the lady who was there in the other house wasn't happy that I was building, and I understand that. But again, I put it in perspective. Yeah, I get it. She's a mum. She's got kids. She's probably scared on like privacy. So I offered to put a higher fence up.
Yeah, okay.
That would help her.
Yeah.
And then she was cool, and I sent her some chocolates and kind of made that like, So
I guess when you explain it from the perspective of like, oh, we need more homes.
Exactly. Yeah. That's again, just to answer your question, that's how I envision it in terms of that. But I'm assuming, are you talking more like in terms of I'm going to own more and more property to take out home buyers? So
yeah, because that's what I get online quite a bit. People are upset that I own one property, and I tried to rationalize and be like, well, I rent one and I own one, so that like it's the same. It doesn't matter if I live there or not. But people get very upset at that. It's been interesting. So I've kind of talked about buying a second one, and people are very upset at landlords at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, when you look at the stats around like how many homes are being built,
you're right.
Just the lack of houses. Yeah. So it's interesting to ask people who are doing it.
I agree. And I said this on a previous podcast I went on too, that it's very tight in terms of rentals. It's insane. Yeah. Like, it's very hard to save your way to a property in current climate. Like, it's very hard for a young person to buy a house. And you see a landlord who's got equity and they're just like, bang. Yeah. And then they'll buy it. At the end of the day, I always sort of say though, like in life, like anything, you get drawn whatever cards you get dealt, right? And at the end of the day, it's those who are resourceful with what they've got, they're always going to get ahead. There's people who are always going to play a victim, and there's always people who are going to play an opportunist. And I don't know, I've always had that mentality. Whatever's going to be on my lap, positive, negative, I'm going to do what you can. Yeah, I'm going to leverage the situation 100%. But I think I really like that question. I think shifting it as well, like I'm providing shelter in a really needed time of. Yeah,
because I've seen it like that as well. Like, even I'm looking for a rental in Melbourne at the moment, and I'm like, wow, like this is quite challenging. So it would be hard if those were taken off the market as well, seeing perspective too. Yeah, I get it can be quite tricky when you're sitting there being like, I can't afford rent tomorrow, and someone's buying another property.
Exactly, yeah. Think of it this way too. This is another one I put perspective on a podcast, was that landlords, not all landlords are these wealthy males in suits that own. To be honest, a lot of them are battlers, mum and dad, investors, people like yourself who are doing great things with their hard-earned money. Interest rates have gone up, cost of living has gone up. So it impacts them from a pain point of view just as much as it does the tenants.
Yeah.
So you could imagine the financial strain on mum and dad investor right now who might have one or two.
Yeah.
You know, they're on the average income. You've got a kid, baby on the way. They're scared and they're stressed. So just as much as pain it is for tenants, I see a lot of pain as well out there in the marketplace for the cost of living for people trying to hold.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen a lot more on TikTok popping up, people's stories. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, whichever way you want to look at the glass, right? 100%. No, that's a really good question though, Tash. Hey, just to wrap it up, these are going so quick because I'm just so invested in your journey and story. What would you tell I've got 2 questions for you, Natasha. What would you tell former Natasha in her late teens, early 20s?
Oh, like a fun one would be to buy Bitcoin. Like that'd be cool. Because obviously that did really well. But like nothing else, like I don't really have any big regrets. I'm glad everything worked the way it did. Like I think if I'd done something differently, I wouldn't be where I am now. It all kind of fell into place. But yeah, I don't think I'd tell her anything. Like it's all gone pretty well, luckily.
Just the way it's meant to be, yeah.
Yeah, like there was the things that I failed a unit at uni, which is like a big sad moment for a while because I was so academically driven when I was younger. But that ended up being one of like the best things that happened because I could work full time and I made a lot of money and then I ended up
Interesting.
Yeah, but like I don't think I would tell her anything because she needed to feel all that stuff.
Yeah. It's nearly like the old sliding door moments in life. Hey, yeah. What about second question? What would you tell the Natasha in her 30s coming into 40s, that period of life?
Which I don't know. This is very reflective.
Yeah.
I don't know. I live so like in the moment now with social media stuff. Like it's so hard to think slightly longer term. So I have no idea. What would you tell your older self?
I'd tell my older self that enjoy the fruit.
Enjoy the fruit. Okay. Yeah.
Enjoy the fruit.
Yeah.
Because I know my future self's going to have some more juicier fruit and it's like, I'm going to eat it more.
Do you enjoy the fruit now?
I'm better at it. Yep, for sure. And I like what you said around experiences. I've realized that balancing experiences is like there's times where money comes in business and things like that. And I listen to a lot of podcasts on like billionaires. I'm just curious the way they think. They're not very different, but one thing I take away from all of them is that whenever they've had a big transfer in wealth, a big deal, a big sell, nothing changes the next day, like nothing. And my biggest reflection is that if you're an empty person without money, you're going to be an empty person with money.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I love how you're not so focused on wealth. It's like there's a life to live. There's places to see and do. And it's amazing that you've been able to still go to that many countries and still do well on the financial side of things as well, which I know inspire a lot of younger people, but in particular, a lot of females too, which brings me to one of my final questions is what's your thoughts now? You're seeing a huge shift. I can notice it with females just dominating the world, even the Olympics. The chicks are dominating the world. What's been your mindset with the male and female kind of with like wages, with just all that kind of thing? I'm interested to hear your kind of thoughts on that.
Social media has been really eye-opening because I used to work in healthcare and I studied occupational therapy, which is like 90% females, and most jobs I had were like all females. So when I started doing this kind of stuff, I was really shocked at a lot of the really sexist comments.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I bet there would be. Yeah,
that's been really eye-opening. Like when you Google my name, the search suggestion says like Natasha Etschmann's father, because that's what people have been Googling. And
to sort of say like, you've had it from your dad.
Yeah, like
really?
LinkedIn.
That's sad, hey?
Yeah. So it's been really
interesting. Just hate that, hey?
Yeah, because I wasn't expecting that. Like I've grown up in a family where you can do whatever you want. Like there's no barriers or anything. So it's been really interesting to see. And I definitely get now why some females feel like they can't do it in the same way. Like if you're not empowered to do it, then you hear all these little comments of like, well, you should be in the kitchen, haha. Like they're meant to be jokes, but like that kind of gets to you after a while as well.
100%.
Yeah, it's been very interesting to see because I thought we'd moved on, but no, we haven't.
It's just insane how the world, like social media wasn't around much when I was a professional. I just see some of my like former like they just cop it. Like it's just like
it's brutal.
It's brutal really online, isn't it?
Very future. Yeah, I feel sorry for people who are younger and not do this. Yeah.
What would be your advice to any people in those spaces? Like how do you kind of, I guess it's not around like blocking it out, but how do you manage and still achieve your goals and still keep as best you can? Like, has there been any tips, tricks or anything? Or is it something you still struggle with?
Yeah, I definitely struggle with it. Like I've put off buying a second house because I just can't.
Scrutiny.
The hate. Yeah. And like, am I doing something wrong actually? Because when like thousands of people are questioning something, you have to kind of stop and be like, am I actually in the wrong here?
Yeah.
The comments are annoying when they are not the ones I expect. Like I kind of expect the really sexist ones these days and like, well, your dad's really rich and stuff like that. But it's when they hate on something like you're using a plastic chopping board. Why are you ingesting all of this plastic? Stuff like that. And I'm like, I didn't realize I was doing that wrong as well. Yeah. It's just like kind of talking to people in my real life and being like, no, I'm not actually doing anything terribly wrong. These people are just really upset for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I can see why I might come across a bit triggering where like my life is kind of easy now. Like I've got all these opportunities now. They don't see the stuff that I used to do before. Like I worked some really hectic jobs to get where I am now. And they don't get to see that, which is fine. And yeah, it's just like society at the moment.
It is, yeah. I mean, we've only met today, but I can definitely say you've got all the ingredients to, do whatever you want. It's just one thing I've always learned, and definitely is like the blinkers on, right? And it's just like people never see what happens behind closed doors.
I want to, yeah.
And the thing is, we'll never be able to justify that too. I'm so big on like what happens in closed doors is for you and your worth and your value is all, because the hard work you've done, right? And your results show. And
there'll always be something that's different. Like it's always never going to be the same.
It's always. I always see if you're making noise, it means you're doing something right.
But in terms of tips, just put your phone away.
Yeah.
Talk to people who can tell you.
Inspire, and they're bringing you up. Hey, 100%. Last few questions. I had Andy, my assistant, put out a little cue to a few different people who I know follow in different things. One common one was, how do you balance, I guess, like funds in relationships versus like being married versus like, is it something, and I'm just curious as well for myself. I've got a partner and we're not married or anything, but like with funds and different things, do you have a mindset framework or any lessons around that, or you keep things separate, or do you know what I mean? Like what's your thoughts on?
I guess it depends on the relationship. My partner is quite driven as well. So we have money completely separate. We've got like things we want to do together and we talk about money quite openly, but I like having it separate and he likes having it separate. We've got our own businesses and our own property and we do all those things. Yeah. I can see maybe joining finances if we have kids in the future in some way, because like you would have to, but for now I'm happy to keep it all separate and just keep the conversation quite open.
I think that's a big one, hey?
Yeah, I've had a shared account in the past with one of my exes, but we were very different with money and that caused problems because I'd like to save and he didn't.
Yeah, that would have been.
Arguments around like, well, I don't want to split that in the shared account or whatever. So that didn't work then.
Yeah.
I think it just depends where you are in your journey. Like I see some people who combine everything and they love it, but I think I'm too, pedantic about stuff now. Or like being like, that's unfair.
Yeah.
I worked harder this week or whatever. So I could just keep it separate.
It's all just the self where you are, right? Yeah. Because I agree. I think a lot of people don't talk about it. What's your thoughts on prenups or like FBAs? Yeah.
Definitely if you've got stuff. It's good to talk about that stuff now while you actually still love each other a lot rather than in the future where it's really hectic. It's good to have a plan and be really honest about it. Even not just for the actual legal document, but to have had that discussion, because you might be assuming something that they aren't thinking at all. So making sure you're both on the same page about that, definitely.
Yeah. Love it. That's really good advice, Natasha. And just lastly, the book. So what can people expect reading this book? And I appreciate the copy too. It's next in line. What can we expect reading the book?
It is just a practical guide to investing in shares in Australia, but it's not just like investing in isolation. It talks about actually investing to build the life that you want or to still have hobbies and to still enjoy life at the same time. I wrote the book with someone called Anna. She's 40 now and she has 2 kids. So we kind of share both perspectives.
It's good little, I was going to say,
Some people find me a bit unrelatable now, but it's good having her popping in with her family stuff too.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Natasha, honestly, that was super insightful, and I just got to credit you. As I said, I didn't know you too much before coming here, but I can see a high performer when I see one, and everything you're doing is just, I like it because it's not the norm, and I believe if you're doing what 99% are doing, you're not going to be in the 1%. I put it in the perspective. If you want to be in the 1%, you need to be literally doing what 99% of your peers, family are doing. Are doing. So you've done really well there, and I love how you're balancing as best you can, having a public persona now, building a profile. There's pros and cons with everything, right? So you're doing really, really well. And I know you're inspiring a lot of, as I said, individuals and especially females. I think it's amazing. So well done. And really appreciate the feedback. Where can people find you?
Thank you. That was so lovely. I am Tash Invest on TikTok and Instagram. We mentioned the book and also the Get Rich Slow Club podcast as well.
Get Rich Slow. I love it. How's TikTok, by the way? I believe it or not, I've got it, but I don't use it.
I grew on TikTok quicker than Instagram initially, but I prefer Instagram. TikTok is just like extra mean.
Is it? Yeah.
The spam comments.
So it's meaner than Instagram. Is it really? Wow.
TikTok pushes your content out to anyone straight away, but Instagram pushes it out to your audience first. So you get nice comments first and then maybe mean ones, but TikTok is just like, people hate you straight away.
Just here you go. Here's a platter of
And
Do your best. Yeah.
the spam comments are just too much on TikTok.
Yeah.
And they won't verify me. So
Yeah.
I'm a bit salty with that. Yeah.
I love it. All right. Well, maybe we'll see each other on TikTok. I'm getting amongst it.
Maybe, yes.
Yeah. Well, Tash, really appreciate it. Safe trip back to Canberra.
Thank you.
And appreciate all you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you.